Networking is not about what you know, and networking is not even about who you know. Networking is about who knows you.
Welcome to Leap Like Me, the podcast that helps you to be bold in life, to stretch what's possible, and find more adventure, joy, and purpose along the way. I'm your host, Lisa Hoashi. I'm a life coach who can help if you're ready to take a new, more authentic direction in life. On Leap Like Me, we share the inspiring stories of people like you who have made a brave leap and offer practical tips for how to set your leap in motion too. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. This is Lisa Hoashi, and welcome to Leap Like Me. I'm so excited for our guest today and for our topic, which is all about networking and what it has to do with living a life of intention and purpose. I've invited Tina Sula, who is a faculty member at the University of Michigan. She has been teaching a course there for students called Network Your Way to an International Internship and Career since 2015. She's also a philanthropic advisor and fundraiser with the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Detroit. Tina has also worked for the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, the United States Mission to the United Nations in Geneva, the Club de Madrid in Madrid, and for the State Department in Washington, D.C. Recently, she also created an online course with the University of Michigan Center for Academic Innovation that you can access for free on Coursera called How to Network, Leading Yourself to Lead Others. Welcome, Tina, to Leap Like Me. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Lisa, so much for this opportunity. I'm so grateful to be with you and all of your listeners.
Yeah, thank you. So I discovered you when I listened to a webinar that you gave last year that was about authentic networking. And you said something that I'm going to paraphrase here in a moment that really stuck with me. And you basically said that opportunities don't just fall from the sky, that someone, a human, has to give them to you. And I just loved that reminder. And I think it was like a great way to think about networking. And as you know, I am a coach that works with people who are kind of at a crossroads moment, thinking about like what's next. And sometimes I know that people arrive at those moments and they're feeling kind of, it can be kind of lonely, full of doubt. You know, you might feel a little isolated. And it's like the moment that we need support from people, and we would love to have opportunities to choose from in those moments. And so this is kind of why I really wanted to bring you on the show to talk a little bit more like how can we arrive at those moments in a place where we're feeling connected and also where opportunities are kind of bubbling up for us.
Yeah. Well, it took me a very long time to learn that lesson, right? Also, I think on that same webinar, I talked about, when I graduated from the University of Michigan, I had this, great resume with great experiences, and then graduation comes and I didn't have, a job. I did all the right things. I did everything the Career Center told me to do, and then people said, well, Tina, you have to network. And I'm kind of like, well, great, what is it, right? And then you go to Google and then you're like type networking and then you're getting these tips and tricks and I'm like, well, that's not me. I can't really do that. So I felt stuck, like you said, like what am I supposed to do? Like I said, I did all the right things. But then I think sort of teaching students, right? When we teach other people, we really get to understand, well, how things work. And I think the biggest life lesson, and I think my students really appreciate, is exactly that, and I learned it from being an immigrant kid. America is the land of opportunity, but opportunities don't fall from the sky. Someone has to give them to you. So today I'm wearing this shirt. It's my Joy shirt from the holidays. It was given to me by my first boss. Her name was Peggy Burns. It was Peggy Burns who I got to sit next to at a scholarship dinner. So I had a scholarship to attend the University of Michigan. And then at the end of my 3 years at Michigan, I was asked if I could give a speech, to talk about all the things that I did as a Michigan student. So I was sitting next to Peggy. She had this big title, which was Assistant Dean for Development, Marketing, Communications. And honestly, I didn't know what development meant. As a poli-sci student, I thought it was international development. And then she asked me, what are you doing after graduation? And so feeling stuck, and I had this sort of idea, and it's a very wrong idea, and we can talk about it later, that I'll probably never see this person again. So what do I have to lose? I said, I'm studying for the LSAT and I really need a part-time job. Any chance you have something for me? So at that moment, the dean interrupts, the program starts. I go and give, my speech when my turn comes. And then when I'm done, I go back to my seat and Peggy's digging through her big purse for her card and says, when you're done with the LSAT, call me, I want you to work with me. And that was the start of my career, as a fundraiser. And it's something that I've been doing, I'm in my 16th year now. So it was Peggy, a human who saw something in me. And then, after my, presentation said, hey, I can give this girl, right, this young person, that moment of lift. So these moments of lift really come from the people that we meet, or the people that we already know. So it's just a matter of how can we let people, around us know what we are looking for so that they can help us get where we need to go. Because we can't give opportunities to ourselves. We can set our, intentions, and we can be on purpose, and, we can, on purpose means to be intentional, right? To do something on purpose. But ultimately, if you could do something on your own, you would have done it. But if you need an opportunity, then there's somebody who has an opportunity to give, and it aligns with what you're looking for, that, then can come to you. So I think, especially, in the US, there is this mentality, I can do it myself, or, I'm independent and all this, but I don't know anyone who's done something on their own. I listen to a lot of, podcasts, or read a lot of, biographies and autobiographies. There are always people behind the scene, that gave that moment of coaching, or that said, hey, let me connect you to this person, for funding, or, hey, let's talk about this. Maybe, you can help me with a project so that you can start your business career. I guess to summarize, I think, I've learned that life is a relationship business and the world is our work.
Yeah.
Everything we do is for one another and to advance humanity.
Yeah. Well, so Tina, there are so many pieces of this that I am looking forward to exploring with you. I think one of them, though, is just to I've just gotten the sense that this moment has been like such an important sort of learning point, and so much of your inspiration then, both for your career. And I do want to point out that you are, a philanthropic advisor and fundraiser. And one of my former bosses and mentors, she was also a fundraiser and philanthropic advisor in international development. And, I know from having observed her that like, she is a master at like creating and maintaining relationships, relationships that have to be built on trust, because you're asking people to give like a lot of money to support, a cause or something, a project. And so it's like, this is very much part of your work. I just really want to underline. I think that what can be really helpful is just what you mentioned about being an immigrant kid. I'm from an immigrant family. So my grandparents immigrated from Japan to the US, and I had, my experience, I can remember that moment in college. It's like my parents had such high hopes for me of going to a really good school, and really achieving. And so it was like, but at that moment that I had like finished,
Yeah.
The education, I'd done like the piece that they had really wanted for me. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I have to go get a job with this now. And then do that next level thing of like going and getting a good job. And I had no idea how to do that. And I guess, I noticed other students around me kind of seeing like they were doing that effortlessly. And I kind of felt like I was starting from scratch, kind of like that like, where am I starting from? So I just am curious about, over the years, as you've thought about this, what is some of your advice for people who kind of feel like they're starting from scratch?
So I guess another aha is that there is no learning without reflection. So I learned this from one of my CEOs that I reported to when I worked at Henry Ford Health System, Lynn Terosian, and it's a powerful thing. There is no learning without reflection, because we're all like so busy doing. I mean, I remember in one of your previous podcasts, you said, if you want to, get a new job, you don't go on LinkedIn, you don't update your resume or all the stuff. You don't even, call your friends. You really have that conversation with yourself and say, what is it that I really want? I mean, that's the self-leadership. You can't lead others and say, help me, until you first and foremost lead yourself. So when I think back about no learning without reflection, I mean, if you look at my college resume, I mean, I was in DC for a semester. I had an internship there. I had an internship in Spain. I had an internship in Detroit. I had an internship in Flint, Michigan. So I was networking, right? Like I was doing the things to get me where I needed to go. But honestly, I didn't do the reflection because no one taught me, until 10 years after college, that there is no learning without reflection, right? So when I was interning in DC, I worked at a think tank. I was at the printer, right? And then there was a senior fellow that came, and we were just chatting, and then she's like, oh, where are you from? And I said, I'm born in Albania, but I'm from Michigan. And she's like, oh, are you enjoying your internship? And I say, oh, it's great, I'm learning this, and this. And she's like, you need to come to my office, I need to show you something because you're Albanian. And I said, okay. So I follow her to her office. There's a picture of Mother Teresa blessing the USAID plane, the first one to go to Albania. And I get really emotional. She and I have this like great connection, right? People give to people. Like she shared this really meaningful experience with me, and then she's like, well, what are you doing next summer? Kind of like another Peggy-ism, right? Where she came to me and she's like, oh, what are you doing next summer? Because, that's what people do. They do internships. And I said, I've applied for a State Department internship. So we'll see how it goes. I said, I would really love to go to Albania as an intern. And she's like, well, let me know how it goes. And January came, I was selected as an alternate. And, I had following up is like the most important part of networking, right? That's because I think trust is built on the follow-up. And most people are like, okay, I got what I wanted from Lisa. You know what I mean? And then I'm just going to go do my thing. And then Lisa's wondering, I connected Tina with this person. I wonder what happened, and then Tina only comes back to Lisa when Tina needs something. But, so I've learned to always follow up, whether it's good news, whether it's bad news, or even it's just, I just wanted to say hi because I've been thinking of you, or this song made me think of you. I read this article or reminded, me of the conversation. So anyways, I followed up with Carol and, just forwarded the email. I get a call 5 minutes later from the State Department. And the lady, and I remember her name to this day, she said, I'm calling from HR at the State Department. We're so excited to offer you a State Department internship. And I'm like, no, because I just got this email. So I think you guys must be confused. And she's like, oh, no. I have it under, I just got a direct email from the Undersecretary for the Bureau of Europe and Eurasia, to offer you an internship. And I'm just kind of like, what? Like, what's going on? As it turned out, the undersecretary And the senior fellow at the think tank where I worked, or where I had worked the previous semester, they were dear friends. So the senior fellow, because of that emotional connection that we had, in her office for a couple of minutes, decided to give me another moment of lift, which was, this girl really wants, to do this. And I have an opportunity, or I know how I can help her, or it's within my power to help her. And she forwarded that email, which resulted in me getting that State Department, internship that I otherwise would not have gotten. So, all the opportunities, I really believe this, all the opportunities that we seek, if we're able to clarify them, if we're able to name them, there is one of our first degree connections will have a connection to someone who will have access to that opportunity, or who can connect us to someone who can help us get us closer to that opportunity. So, I think when, people say I'm feeling alone and isolated, well, you have to do it's counterintuitive, right? It's like, when you're feeling alone, go and reach out to people, right? Be vulnerable. I think we forget to be vulnerable, because we don't want to be seen like a failure. We don't want to seem like a loser, whatever that, that feeling at the moment is. But I've learned that when I'm vulnerable and say, I'm having a hard time, or I don't know how to figure this out, or I'm really just stuck, I think that's where, and I'm sure there's plenty of psychological studies that can attest to this, but I think that's where other people are most, inspired to help you and say, oh, don't worry, we got this. You're looking for a new job. I'm going to set informational interviews with, 5 people that I know. And I think then if we create the processes, and if we do follow up and meet those people, and then if we do follow up with those people, then those next, then those people then connect us to more people. And then before we know it, that we have more opportunities than we know what to do with. But it's the taking action part and saying, I could be miserable and feel sorry for myself, or I can go and share with others, what I need, and really rely, on their, on them to help and support, right? Life is a relationship business. People, I have learned, and I've learned this, being in philanthropy, well, people give millions of dollars because they want to make the world a better place. People want to help. People want to make the world a better place. So I think if we have, that mindset, and we trust that, I mean, sure, 1 out of 10 people might be busy, or they might not respond to your email, but there will be, other people who will respond to, your email and give you, like I say, that moment of lift.
So what I'm hearing, like, just to go back to that idea of like, I kind of feel like I'm starting from scratch, or I'm stuck, or I'm feeling isolated. It's really about taking some time to reflect on what it is that you really want. Think about what it is that you could potentially share with other people or ask them for, taking into like that vulnerability into account, that people actually do want to help. And even though it can feel scary to be like, hey, I need help, or to be like, I'm lost, I'm feeling kind of lost, can you help? To take that risk. Anything else to add kind of on that front?
So another clarity, I think, is like so important. So I can give you the example, like an example from my own life, right? There was like another moment in my life where I was like, okay, maybe I don't want to be a fundraiser anymore, right? But everybody had branded me as a, Tina is a fundraiser, or Tina is a teacher, right? We all have brands, like what people say or think about us when we're not with them. Right. So I spend a lot of time with my students to really help them align, who they are with how they show up. Right. So if you're wanting to make a pivot, right, or if you're at a crossroads and you don't want to do what you did previously, right,
Absolutely.
then you have to do that, the self-leadership, the soul searching, where you say, I really want to pivot to ABC. And then you have to start, introducing yourself or showing up in a way that very much aligns, the new direction that you want to follow, right? Because we're humans, right? We seek patterns, right? So if Tina's a teacher, then we will always think of Tina as a teacher. And if Tina wants to pivot, and become an astronaut, then it's going to take a while for us to think of Tina as an astronaut, because that's the new direction that she has chosen, and people are not going to do that work for you. I mean, that's work that you're going to have to, you have to do for yourself. And I have found, and I think this is the hardest exercise for a lot of my students, it's if you do the informational interviews, like one-on-one, and if somebody gives you 20 or 30 minutes or an hour of their time, and you let them know that, this is what I want to do, this is why I want to do it, help me figure out how I can do it. And I think the why is the most crucial, because people want to make sure that, your reason and your rationale and your motivation is good, right? Yeah. They want to know that you're not wasting their time.
And they can get behind it, right?
Exactly.
To figure out the how.
And so I think that becomes like hugely important. So, when Simon Sinek says start with why, I mean, that's what he's saying. Like, we as humans want to know your motivation. We want to know if we should align with you, right? Does your purpose, right, align with my purpose, right? Because if it aligns, I'll go to the moon and back for you to support you, right? But if we're not aligned, right, or if your values don't align with mine, I probably wouldn't make as much of an effort. So I think this is where, I say that fundraising is an inside job, or development is an inside job. So philanthropy is an inside job, which basically means that philanthropy is a form of leadership, because leadership is an inside job. Like, I another one of your podcasts, somebody talked about how, I think in Spain, I mean, this was the case for my dad in Albania. You know what I mean? You sort of pick what you're going to study, study it, and then, you get a job, right?
Right.
But the thing about leadership is, like, no one gives you a sort of, this is your journey. You got to do this, then this, then this, then this. When you are the CEO of a company, you're leading with your values, because there is no, these are the instructions. You're doing it based on what you think is important, based on the direction that you want, you believe is the right one, for the world, or for the company, or for the people that you lead. So, and I think, before I started teaching, because I think as a teacher, I am a coach to my students, I didn't really understand the value of coaches, and you are one, right? And then now I have this exercise that I talk about. It's like, can you see the things, that are the tip of your nose, right? I mean, I can see the tip of my nose because, I'm on video, right? But, if I look this way, if I look this way, I see this side. If I look this way, I see this side. But we need a friend or a coach, or a mentor or a teacher, for the things that are so dear to us, but we can't articulate. I mean, that's the whole point of coaching, like somebody who can take you on that journey so that you can articulate, what's most important to you.
Yeah.
That's at the tip of your nose.
Well, and like you mentioned, I think you bring up a great point about the sort of career pivoting. I'd be curious to know how you handled that in the end. But, I work with people a lot around career pivots. And like you said, we have to it can be a really challenging moment, because like you said, we're having to do the work for other people to get them to think of us in a different way, as we are also kind of charting this new territory that we've never done before. And we feel kind of, scared and unsettled by, and we're not sure how it's going to turn out. So I'm curious, and maybe from your own experience, how do you advise people at those moments to kind of, like you said, like to kind of rebrand themselves, or to, to move along that path to where they can kind of show up and say, hey, now I'm the astronaut.
Okay. I mean, so I can give you my own experience. So I started my career in higher ed fundraising, So I did alumni relations. Then I did international fundraising for the Liberal Arts College at Michigan. And then my Peggy decided to transition and go to healthcare. And, she and I had a conversation about me joining her, in healthcare, right, as a healthcare fundraiser. So I'm married to a physician, and the joke was, when I made this pivot, that, oh, Tina's going to be a great fundraiser in healthcare because she's married to a doctor, because every woman wants to be judged by, her husband's profession. You know what I mean? But that was my only connection at that time to healthcare. So I did just fine, in healthcare. I feel like I really got to understand healthcare because, we all have transferable skills. And I think sometimes we don't realize how transferable our skills are, until we have a coaching moment or we go to a workshop and somebody actually makes us sit down and, start thinking about them. But I go back to life is a relationship business. People give opportunities to people. And most everybody that I know, the opportunity that they got, most of the statistics are made up on the spot, but I'm willing to bet that probably for more than 80% of the people, the opportunity they got is because of their network. Like somebody trusted them, somebody vouched for them, just like Peggy vouched for me in healthcare and said, Tina can figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And when you have that kind of support and somebody says, like, I've seen her be successful, I've seen her solve the problems, I think that's the most important thing. It's when I was hired in the job that I have now, a lot of the people that I worked with previously were called, right? I mean, this is sort of where, you put, here are my references. Sometimes they call those references. Sometimes they just call, somebody that they know who knows me. But that's the whole point of references. The whole point of references is, can I trust that this person will do the job? So obviously, like to make a transition from a fundraiser to astronaut, you probably have to go and, learn engineering and all that kind of stuff. Right. And then you're going to have a network, right? You're going to have people in the, astronaut world that you're going to get to know. Then your job is to make sure that you build relationships with those people. So, I'm a lists person, you know what I mean? So, I have my list of 10 people that I'm going to, call or have a touch point with today, whether it's donors or whether it's former students or whether it's, who else do I have? People that I know from LinkedIn world, right? People that, I build relationships, but I've never met and I would like to meet. When I came back from California to Michigan, and then I was like, okay, well, I want to find a job in Michigan, and we moved at the end of July, I had a job, like I already had signed in mid-March because, I had called a friend and said, hey, I saw this posting. What do you think? And he was like, oh my God, you're coming back to Michigan. This is exciting. I'm going to hang up now and I'm going to call the head of HR for you. Right. Because, he and I had continued that relationship. We would say a happy new year. Right. Or, hey, I'm working, with this mental health startup and, you're someone who really cares about the space. What are your thoughts on this? Right. Like I had engaged him, with something related to his purpose and the things that are meaningful to them. So like, you can't possibly do something with that mindset of, I'm going to be nice to this person because I'm going to need them in the future, because like, you can't do that for the entire world. It has to be, when we talk about authentic networking, it has to be because you really want to connect with that person and, you want that person in your world, right? It's not, if you're going to do something with, I need him or her, people, first of all, feel fake really easily. Like, it's energy.
They can sense it.
Right. They can sense it. So, if you're going to do something, do it in alignment with who you are.
Yeah. Tina, I want to go back to, this was something I really wanted to ask you about, is that, there are lots of relationships that I want to be cultivating and, we all get kind of busy and it's like, and I am seeing more and more that I do need to have kind of systems, like you said, that structure and those habits built so that I'm I can really keep track of am I checking in with these close friends? Am I checking in with these people in my more collegial business world, with these clients? What are some of the systems that you have set up, that structure that supports you? I love the to-do list, but yeah, I'm curious, how do you kind of keep track and make sure that you're doing that follow-up that you mentioned was so important for creating trust and relationships?
Yeah. So now there is an app called Clay that helps you do that. It integrates like your LinkedIn. So,
Clay,
Clay,
CLAY
y.earth. So sort of like you pick up things on LinkedIn and people make posts. So I got to know, the team from Clay. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, because now, there is an app that will set reminders for me. Some people need that kind of reminder. For me, to be honest, I am a fundraiser. I am in the relationship business. So I'm always, in it, and it's one of those things where if something takes like 30 to 60 seconds, I think the rule is to just do it. Mm-hmm. So whenever I think about someone, I just send the note. You know what I mean? It's a very Tina thing to do. You know what I mean? So you have to do things that are, aligned with, like I keep saying, you have to do with things that are authentic to you, aligned with who you are. So there is the app. For me, they say that you can only handle 150 relationships at a time. I forgot the name of the law. So, you can literally have an Excel list of these 150 relationships. And you can prioritize. You can have tier A and tier B and tier C. And then you can say, it's really important for me to reach out to my top 25 at least once a month. And then you can just track it. I reached out, in January. When did I reach out to my top 25? In February, when did I do that? It doesn't seem very wholesome, because you're like, oh, I have a list.
Right, because you have a list.
The reminder, but that's the reminder that we need.
Yeah. One of my clients, actually, she just decided like a priority was that she was going to just really nurture her friendships. And so she just, on a whiteboard, in her kitchen, she had like, when was the last time she contacted, her 5 friends? And she would just kind of put like, oh, the last time I saw them for dinner. And then, here I sent them a text. And I think it's a great idea. Like you said, it can kind of feel maybe a little weird to have a list, but I think that when you have an intention, it's just like anything else in life. When we have an intention to grow or develop or nurture, then it's like, we need those trackers sometimes, I think, because otherwise life just gets in the way,
If you don't set the structure where I'm going to block time to do the things that I value. So if your relationships are what you value, then you have to block time for them, or before you know it, it's, new year 2024.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I'd really like to ask you about, in addition to those habits, is about the etiquette, which is, you kind of got into it a little bit about, about the follow-up. But I would love to hear a little bit more about like your advice on how to make sure that you really are, following up with people, especially who have given you opportunities, and any other things that people should kind of keep in mind, that are either going to damage the trust or like help build the trust in the relationships.
So, I teach a networking mindset and networking process, right? Just so, because it's always nice to start with theory, so we're all talking, the same language. So, and the networking mindset is that we can achieve our goals and purposes through our relationship with others, right? So this is why, where we, started the conversation around people give opportunities to people. So if you believe that we can achieve our goals and purposes through our relationships with others, then we can move to the networking process, which is, okay, how do we do it? So, there's more on the online course on that, but it's a 4-step process. Number 1 is, what are you trying to achieve? Step 2 is, who can help you, or who you want to start with, because networking is about who, networking is about people. Then step 3 is you have to go and make the ask, right? So, but when you make the ask, it's kind of like your emails and your communications when you reached out to me. It was very clear what you did, why you did it, and then how you did it. You know what I mean? Where I didn't have to guess, where I could say, her why aligns with my why, right? And the how she wants to do it is something that I can actually do, right? Because if you asked me to do something that I couldn't do, you know what I mean? Then I could basically say yes. And then that step number 4 is, the follow up and follow through and the sharing of gratitude. So I think a lot of people get stuck on I can't ask for help. You know what I mean? Because, what am I going to give? What can I do for that person? And so this is definitely the case, for the undergrad population.
Right.
They're
they feel like they have low.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, why would somebody want to talk to me? Or, I think that's also the case when you're feeling very, isolated and alone. Why would somebody want to talk to me? But the thing about it, and again, we talked about it earlier, is people do want to help, right? People do want to engage. All you have to do is be clear, once again, about what you want and why you want it. And, what exactly are you looking for, so that people can say, yes, Lisa, I can help you with that. Or no, Lisa, I cannot help you with that, but let me introduce you to my friend, Zane. Right? So being really clear is so important. And that's why step number 1, is the first step. And it goes back to, your previous podcast around what are you really trying to accomplish here? Forget the how. Let's start with where are we trying to go? It's like I always tell my students, you can have a GPS, right? Like you can say networking is your GPS. The problem is if you don't have an end destination where that you're trying to go to Ann Arbor, then you're just going to redirect and redirect and redirect.
It's not useful. Yeah.
Right. It's not meaningful. So I think once you get to, I am contacting this person because, then actually just reach out. Like, what's the worst that can happen? They're going to say no.
Okay.
It's really easy for me to
I love that. So if you've got the because, then that's enough for you to reach out.
It's, and then you have to be go back to vulnerability. I'm reaching out because I really want to transition, from being a recruiter to being a software engineer or whatever, or a data engineer. And I see that you've made this like a similar transition. Any chance you can give me 15 minutes of your time, it would really make the world of difference for me. And you can, it's easy. You can email people. Most everybody's emails, I feel like, are on the internet. You can find them on LinkedIn. In most cases, you'll probably find these people on LinkedIn because they're telling you their story. I mean, if I am out there teaching a class or posting on LinkedIn, and if you don't feel comfortable to reach out to me, I'm literally telling you, like, I can help with this.
Here I am.
My experience, right? So just do it. And it's be okay with rejection. You know what I mean? I'm very okay with rejection because I get rejected all the time. I ask people for money to make the world a better place. Many times they say yes, sometimes they say not now, and sometimes they say I'm not aligned with that. That's not the thing that I care most about. And then I think once you have these meaningful conversations with people, then do a meaningful follow up and a meaningful thank you, and keep people in the loop.
This is where I can see the structure would really help, because sometimes opportunities take a long time to kind of, turn into something. And I think maybe that's where people can kind of fall off. And I know I can remember some things right now of like, I didn't follow up with that person for that thing they introduced me to a year ago, which in the meantime has like really made a difference to me. And I never have told them, but it's been a while.
So, I feel like each of us has like a quote that's our own, or many quotes where it's like people will know it as, a Lisa-ism or a Tina-ism. And I think one of mine, and I remember writing it in one of my, what's it called? My note cards that has my, my name at the top. And mine, I think for this decade, what or was or is, be someone people remember. I say, my definition of networking, maybe we should have started with that, is, networking is not about what you know, and networking is not even about who you know. Networking is about who knows you. So it really aligns with be someone people remember, because if people are the ones who give opportunities, people, have access to opportunities all the time. We get emails, we get, like a friend is, you're meeting at the friend at, for happy hour, and they're like, oh my God, I can't recruit for this position. It's really annoying because I really need someone to help with this. If people don't know what you stand for, right? This is like the personal brand. If people don't know what you're trying to accomplish with your life or your professional life, how can they help you, right? Like, because there's so many opportunities. How can they connect, the opportunities that align with you? Can I sort of have a final thought?
Definitely. Let's hear it.
So my final thought is around value alignment. I think if there is anything sort of like my biggest lesson, I always have lessons. Like when I go on a trip, like this is my big takeaway, but my biggest takeaway from my almost 20 months in California was the importance of value alignment. So it's very clear, right, that your values, and your purpose align with my values and my purpose around how we serve other people. Because at the end of the day, leadership is about serving others. It's not about being a boss. So as we think about, it's great when you have a job offer. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, great, I got a job offer. I'm no longer at crossroads. Like I made it to the end point. But there is no point to accepting a job because you need a job if you're going to end up being miserable in that job. So think very hard about, what are the values of the company and of the people that work at that company, and really determine if their values and their mission statement, which, is kind of like us having a mission statement or a purpose, align with who you are. Yeah. Because if we don't have value alignment, if we don't have that, then we're going to be back on the, at the drawing board before we know it. So it's okay to get excited, but go and have the informational interviews with people who work at that company, like as you're doing the interviews or even beforehand, to determine like, what is that company really all about? And there is a difference between informational interviews, which are informal, like people will share with you very openly, right? It's, hey, Tina, it's like this, and this. Because once you go on a formal interview, they no longer represent themselves. They represent the company. So take the time to get as much information as possible to really determine that alignment. And I think as you're meeting people, the people you want in your network are the people who are going to be value aligned to you. Because when you're value aligned, it's a real relationship. When you're aligned with somebody because of, oh, they're the CEO or the CMO, it's not a real relationship. You know what I mean? You're not going to value them if they didn't have that position. So and people give opportunities to people who their value aligned with. And that's where we talked about, being sincere and being authentic, because people can smell fake.
Yeah. Well, and I think this like circles back to kind of the very beginning point you mentioned about like where to start with networking, which is that reflection of like, what do I want? Well, it's like when you get the opportunity, you also have to circle all the way back there and think like, does this align with my original desire or intention? And really check that, right? So that we're not being led astray just by opportunities. Yeah.
And then I think everybody, like I said, wants to help. So if even in your sort of follow-up, even if you could say things like, you help bring me clarity. Or, I remember saying to someone as follow-up, you've confused the heck out of me. Like our conversation, like I am so confused. You know what I mean? Because now I'm like, do I do this or do I do this or do I do that? And I remember sending, like I write notes, like handwritten notes. And I remember getting the call from that person and saying, that is the most thoughtful card I've ever gotten. And I'm kind of like, really? Because I'm confused over here. And I thought, and he's like, because it was real. And I think today's world, people crave real. So it's okay to be real, because when you're being real, you're also assessing that value alignment. Right.
Yeah.
So if someone like if that person would have responded to me with, wow, you're like weird and awkward, that's probably not a person. And I'm going to spend a lot of time and effort and energy, trying to, make a part of my circle, a part of my community.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tina. It has been such a pleasure to have you on the show, and you've left us with so much food for thought. So many different things to incorporate as we think about, how to go about like building these relationships. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I look forward to learning more.
Yes. And we're definitely going to include your info in the show notes so people can be in touch with you on LinkedIn if they like, or check out your Coursera, which I highly recommend. Super thorough. So many great ideas there too.
Oh, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. So big hug from Detroit, Michigan.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. That was so fun. Thanks for joining us today. Do you know someone who would also appreciate the advice and ideas from today's show? Take a minute right now to send it along to them. We would love it if you'd share these episodes of Leap Like Me with friends, family, and your colleagues. Until next time, be bold and take good care.